Morning! Hello everyone, Andrew Kircher again from Port Huron Museums, doing another little walk on a pretty nice day outside. Even though you can't be around other people, it is nice to just stretch your legs a little bit and get outside the home. And our last video proved pretty popular, so I figured it'd be another time to look at some of my favorite homes in the area and some of my other favorite buildings and talk a little bit about some architecture you can see right here in town and probably already have. You drive by it all the time. Give it a second, maybe a few people will join us here. Some of the homes, there's a great Queen Anne over there we're going to talk about. We talked a lot about Queen Anne homes last time we were out and about on one of these walks. So there we've got some people. We talked a little bit about Queen Anne homes. To mention, I don't know if I did or not, they were really popular in the 1880s. My disdain for how much I don't like the term Victorian because it's such a wide range. We are going to look at some other Victorian era buildings. This one's actually a little bit after this. This one's like 1906, so Queen Victoria had been dead for a few years. But that same kind of style. So again, we got a Queen Anne over there, but we'll look at some more of those. There's a lot of great ones in town. Good morning, Todd. I know that a lot of people recognize this building. So this is, some people call it the Maccabees building, but if you actually look right up below the pediment there on the frieze, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about some of those names and pieces. This is Ladies of the Maccabees. So for those who might not know entirely about the history, I'll give you a kind of a condensed version of that. The Maccabees were a fraternal order here, and they kind of became a regional thing. They eventually were kind of a form of life insurance, and in fact this is the Ladies Auxiliary. This was not their main building. If that gives you an idea of the kind of money and power that they had. Their main building was actually down there. It was the what most of us today know of as the Algonquin Hotel. If you remember, it unfortunately burned down 20 years ago. But that was the main Maccabees temple, whereas this was for the Ladies of the Maccabees. So this is obviously a very classical building. Very, very classical in the types of ornamentation they use. Now, when we talk about architecture and we talk about styles, we give these broad names and styles, and there are, kind of textbook examples, but more often than not, not everything is a textbook of something, but this is a pretty good example. Motifs and styles that you would see in one of these buildings. And obviously this looks very, very classical, very much like the Greeks and the Romans. If you look at the whole history of architecture going back, I'm doing my best to get a couple of details here. The Greeks and the Romans were around for a long, long time, and they were very influential, especially in Western architecture. And there were a lot of different movements, and the 1820s and 30s in particular, there's a movement in the United States, Greek Revival, where everyone wanted to create these kind of Greek-looking buildings. And what makes it look like that? Well, one of the big things you'll notice, this building is symmetrical. That's one of the first questions when you analyze a building. Is the building going to look the same? If you put a line right down the middle, does it look the same over there? This one is very, very symmetrical. You've got these big columns in the front, and there are different types of columns. There's a whole vocabulary that if you liken an architect, a designer, to a writer, there's a large vocabulary they can use, different elements they can put in to make you think of different things. So this has got some kind of Corinthian columns there up at the top. You can see these are kind of the fanciest. These would have been like a Roman era thing, but you can see they've got kind of those scrolls. They go all the way around, and those are acanthus leaves. So it kind of looks, makes me think of iceberg lettuce, but I don't think this plant. Same thing with, if you look So right above my finger, I'll take it away so it'll zoom in, behind the column, there are little pilasters built in. So the pilaster is kind of square, and it's like half a column built right into the wall. It's got these acanthus leaves up at the top, and you see the above the two windows there's a lot of scroll work. And if you look up, we can see the other big thing that the whole thing is literature. So above the columns, you've got a frieze, and above that you've got this kind of triangular piece called a pediment. Sometimes you'll even see, if you think about really famous Greek buildings like the Parthenon, they had statues inside. So cool artwork in there. You've got these great big blocks. Those blocks are called dentils. I think I mentioned those in the last one. And denticulation. Dentils because they kind of look like teeth. Hopefully nobody's teeth that you know. They'd be kind of scary looking in somebody's mouth. So those are the kinds of things you do to harken back to the Greeks or the Romans. And why would you want to do that? Well, you think about these Greek buildings that have been around for 2,000 years. They kind of give you an idea of power. They've been there a long time. People want to emulate that. If they've got a big, important building, they want it to look like that. If that kind of makes sense. We've got, there's kind of a neat little thing here. There's a modified, this is called a Palladian window, where you've got kind of three windows, and the middle one's got kind of a round piece above it. That's something you see in some Italianate buildings. This one, again, not every building is, directly one kind of style or another. There are many that just use like little bits and pieces to kind of remind you of this or that. A lot of homes in town, don't knock it at all, they're beautiful homes, but they're more vernacular. They don't use as kind of high of a style. All right, so we're going to walk just a little bit because I want to compare that Greek building with a couple of my favorite homes in the area that are Italianate buildings. Now, there's a couple writers, like the 1830s and 40s, I mentioned that these Greek buildings are popular for all sorts of things. Public institutions, think about all the big buildings in Washington, D.C., big important banks, they tend to look like this. Well, people were even building their homes to look like a Greek building. And the thing about the Greek buildings, it was very popular, but there were a couple architects who said, hey, the buildings we're copying were big temples. People didn't live in those. Maybe this isn't a great thing to copy if it's a place you just want to live in. All right, so if that makes sense. So they offered some alternatives. There's a guy, I think Andrew Jackson Dowding, who he's a big proponent of Gothic revival. So he says, maybe we use some of the, we leave the Greek stuff for the public buildings, and for private buildings we can do cool Gothic revival, things that look kind of medieval. There's actually a cool little example of this right over here. So you see this great big peak in the middle of the house. That's a pretty Gothic looking thing. All right, so I came over some of my other favorite homes in the area. These are some that you probably recognize. If you don't know where we are, right down here. We're by the bridge. We're by where usually the hollyhock is. But they are not quite... they must be outside. I just got a couple of messages on my phone. So anyway, Italianate buildings. So these were kind of a response to this. You start seeing these during like the 1860s, the 1870s. There's no cutoff. You could still build one of these today if you really wanted. But this is when they would have been at their most popular. And a couple of things that make an Italianate distinct from a Greek building or a classical building like that. You see again, we got a symmetrical form here, but not all Italianates were. Actually, the one next door is a great example of the other kind, this Italianate villa. It's got a really cool tower right there. There's an Italian word that basically means church tower, and it's what you see these referred to as. But they have another distinguishing feature. They've got these friezes. So if you look right above my finger up there, kind of this great big piece that goes around here, these are supposed to look like something you would have seen in like the 1500s, the 1600s in Italy, but a new version of it. So do you see these, they're called brackets, that are hanging out here. You can see them over here. Sometimes they're painted. these big heavy brackets are something that are very distinctly Italianate, that makes that style really stand out. So a lot of times you see, as I mentioned, they are either square. This one's kind of got an L shape to it. Now I think, especially this guy over here, looks a whole lot like there may have been an addition. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. These buildings that are dozens and dozens and dozens and sometimes well over 100 years old, you know, you want to change things. You want to make things better. Oh, this is cool. I don't know if you guys can actually see it. Way back there, right above my finger, there is another Italianate tower that's sticking up. So you can kind of see, gives you an idea about this neighborhood and its age. And now one of the other cool things that another cool term, here's your architecture term for the day. These houses have a mansard roof. Now mansard roof, and actually this is a great place to look at them. We think about, you know, this is a cross gable over here. This is something that you'd see in a lot of houses with a gable looking at the front, a couple of big triangles, a very peaked and pointy roof, the kind of roof you wouldn't want to really stand on. Over here, this is a mansard roof. So is that over there. They're popular with a style of home called Second Empire, and a lot of times you see that blending in the Second Empire homes. And Italianate, their styles kind of overlap, the time periods overlap a little bit, but it's something we still use today. So here is a mansard roof on a more modern building. It's much more utilitarian in what you see. So there's your term for the day. You'll see lots of those mansard roofs as you start looking. Actually, this one kind of is like a fake mansard roof, because look, it doesn't go all the way back. It doesn't cover anything in the back. They didn't want you to see that. So it's a utilitarian building. It's something you see every day. But there's a couple of different styles that you would have seen in the 19th century, and we just walked less than one block and had a whole lot to talk about there. So if you enjoyed these, you'd like the videos that we've been putting out while everyone's kind of stuck at home on their computers. Again, my name's Andrew Kircher. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Port Huron Museums. I enjoy doing these, but I would enjoy going back to regular work, just like everybody else in the country, I'm sure. If you enjoy these, consider supporting the museum. You could do that right now by picking up some tickets for when we reopen, or a Huron Experience Pass, which would let you see all of our sites, which are located actually right down there in this beautiful part of town, as well as even a membership. All of them will be good for a full year from whenever it is in the not too distant future when we are able to reopen. We really look forward to seeing all of you and having you back in to our sites. So with that, remember, history is right here in your own backyard. It's a great opportunity to go on a little walk. Just stay well away from other people and enjoy, see what you can find. If you've got any ideas or any buildings you kind of want to see covered or maybe find out more about, throw it down there in the comments, and we'll see you all soon. Stay safe.